Hi, everyone. We're here for our 10th episode today. So we managed to our 10th episode, and we're talking about something that might seem a little bit boring, but we think that we will make it very interesting for you. We will talk about the supranational organizations like European Union and NATO. We will compare a little bit these two organizations, the difficulties to become a member in the case of EU or an ally in the case of NATO. But we will also compare them to the United States and see a little bit the differences and how independent the states, the countries are, and what's the role of the federal government, or in the case of the EU, of the European Commission. So Greg is an expert for NATO. I don't know NATO very much. Oh, don't make that face. But I know EU a little bit more. So we will exchange a little bit of information. And because of me being Albanian, maybe I will focus and I will take some examples from the hard process of Albania to become a member of the EU, just to make things a little bit more easy to understand. Was I right?
No, first off,
Or
great roll in. I love the great roll in. I do like that. And second off, not a NATO expert. And third, for sure, this will be boring. But for some people, that they're just, I guess, don't listen. But hopefully, it'll be informative.
yes, it will be informative. And also we hear so much about European Union and NATO. Of course, we hear a lot more about United States, but something that is being heard so much nowadays is now that with Trump 2.0, maybe it's time for EU to take a stronger role. On the other side, we don't know if, I mean, when I say we, not the Americans, we don't know if United States will withdraw from NATO. So, all the three entities are very, how do you say, relevant or in the current news, or so maybe that's why it will not be so boring.
Okay, that's fair. I was going to say they were hesitant to make decisions, and that's okay. You make your own sentences. No, no, no. Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Let's go. What do you want to talk about? What do you know?
So let's start about the European Union.
Okay.
I could start a little bit
Yeah.
with it. So actually, no, yeah, actually, currently there are 27 members, and but it just started with 6 members, and of course it was France and Germany, but the West Germany, because it started after the Second World War. And the idea, it was really interesting. I mean, I'm just going to make a parenthesis, but a few days ago I was watching a program at the Italian channel, and I don't know if you remember this famous Italian actor who also won the Oscar, Roberto Benigni. Uh, no.
Not gonna know.
Okay. And he won the Oscar with the movie Life is Beautiful, telling about the Second World War and the Holocaust. And he's kind of very politically engaged. So he was making this program talking just about Europe and the European Union. And it was really illuminating because he was going into facts, etc., etc. And he started to say that the idea of the European Union started in a prison in Italy during the Second World War and during the Mussolini regime in Italy. And there were these 3 journalists or 3 friends that were in prison during the Mussolini regime. And they were thinking that the only way to save Europe, because it was like the Second World War, but they started in Europe. So, yes, it started in Europe. So, and the only way for Europe to be saved from these wars, and just the two world wars, but before those wars, we had so many other European wars, like not the world one. So the only way was to make peace and to find a way to make all the European countries to collaborate together in order not to have war anymore. And so they made a kind of a manifesto that was the same manifesto that after that was done by a French guy called Jean Monnet. That it's like the, the, how do you say, the genesis? No.
Yeah, yeah. Beginning.
Yeah, the beginning. The genesis is a very like a big word, but the
It works.
beginning
I like it.
of the or the inception of the idea of the European Union. So it was really interesting,
So
like to
Genesis was too big of a word, and then you went with a bigger one. Okay, keep going.
oh really?
Well,
So
how are you going from Trump 2.0 to the inception? Okay. Well,
no,
what was the Trump
no,
caveat
no,
there?
no. The trap was because of this fear that was in the not in the beginning, but it's still in some articles in newspapers. You see what's going on, what's going to happen with NATO. So will the US withdraw? Will the US gonna be still in all the UN organizations or not? Because it's a kind of unpredictable what Trump will do, especially in relation to these international organizations like the UN. You know that during the first mandate he withdrew from UNESCO, for example, and then
I think that's a
entered
great.
again.
We
So
should definitely hit up the not just the Trump piece, but the Trump is instrumental in di- in kind of gauging the United States' participation on the world stage, because he is a huge pendulum swing one way, but we'll get to it. You know, the pendulum always swings back the other way eventually. So that's a good topic, and let's answer that in the end. In the end, if we can, will the U.S. pull out of NATO or the U or any other organization? What the UN? No, they're not going to pull out of that. So just NATO. Okay. I'm just writing down these things so we can hit them up on the way out. Because I know we talk for an hour and then before we're done, we're like, we finish,
yeah,
we've left so much unsaid.
yeah.
At least, you.
Especially me, because you know that I open so many parentheses, so I leave like half of the things that I've prepared for
But that's
some
one thing I
like
think we could probably talk a little bit about in not answer, but expand upon a little bit. So I'm sorry, keep going. EU.
no, I was just saying that it was after the Second World War, that this idea was really like incepted, and then it was made, put in place, or it was made a reality. And it started with these six countries: Belgium, France, Italy, as I said, West Germany at that time, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. And it was mostly an economic agreement between these six countries. And then it was developed also on a political ground and also on human rights grounds, etc. And now we have 27 countries with some more waiting to be part of the European Union. And I think the other specific of the European Union is that we have the European Union from one side, and then we have the continent of Europe. So for me, being an Albanian, being in the continent of Europe, and sometimes I hear the expression, "Oh, you're not European." I think I am, in the sense of being part of the continent of Europe, but maybe it's not that I am an EU citizen. So, there is also this kind of discrepancy of the identity. What does it mean to be European? So, is it only to be a EU citizen, or also because we're in the same continent? So,
Sure, there's a lot to answer that question, a lot of cultural, assessments to make, but ultimately, if somebody said that to me, I'd say, "Hey, I know who I am, and let me answer that question for myself, and you can mind your own business." But that's up to you. You decide. If somebody told me as a Floridian that I'm not an American, I would question that type of statement. So I guess you could probably do the same thing. I love the idea that Luxembourg was included, or they participated in the beginning because just a strong team starts with Luxembourg. I'm telling you. I'm not trying to be, I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not being negative either. It's just they're the smallest country, in Europe, right? Or maybe not. Maybe there's Vatican, Monaco. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're such a small little country, and I don't know why they're not Switzerland for sure. They should just be like a city in Switzerland. But I love them. Good for you. I'm sorry. Huge sidetrack. Um,
But they have, I think that they have a really high GDP. And
I don't imagine they don't. They don't have to pay anything for defense.
and and it's a very, I mean, if I'm sure that you visited
Yeah,
Luxembourg, but when
that's
you're
that's
there, you
further
see that
south.
it's quite a rich like
Yeah, I know.
place. So yeah,
I wish I was a
and
Luxembourger.
yeah.
Anyways, the EU in comparison to what, NATO, I guess, and then we were talking about this earlier, and one of the ideas that you said that made this sound like such an interesting discussion for me is the comparison to the EU and United States and federalism, the separation between states and federal law and federal rights. And we were talking a little bit earlier about um, how who has more power, with compared in comparison to the organization, the United States under federalism or European countries under EU charter. Is that how you would say it? And it's an interesting question because from my perspective, I would start off by saying that the United States federal system, states have they on paper have less rights. And because, if you think about the EU, those are all sovereign countries, sovereign states. So they should theoretically have more power. But if I was to be like the devil's advocate, I would look at the United States now and recognize that in the US, we have states that have sanctuary cities. We have states that are indeed sanctuary states unto themselves. And what does that mean? That means they violate federal law with the understanding that they're risking either federal funding or some type of, I don't know, supreme law, whatever the Supreme Court comes down and makes them follow. So again, on paper, the U.S. states have less freedom, but if they're breaking the law or violating the Constitution until the Supreme Court says they are not or they can't anymore, do they have more freedom? So what do you think about that idea? Do you think European states have more freedom? And I guess it has to be a comparative. You can't say compare them to US states, but within their framework. So an individual state, an individual country in the EU, does it have a great deal less power in their autonomy compared to the EU itself, to the EU charter? What do you think?
uh, I think that it depends on, I mean, the EU members, they have quite an autonomy as independent countries. So, I mean, the European Union, it's could be mostly called as a confederation rather than as a federation, in the sense that the central government, so the European Commission, it's not as powerful in the decision as, for example, the US government. But on the other side, there, for a EU member, for a country to be a EU member state, it means that they have to have accepted the what is called, and it's in French, so you know that I love to
Bring it.
include some French words. So it's the what is called the acquis communautaire. So it's the laws of the EU, and they have to accept these acquis and to respect them. Why are you laughing? Because
Can you
no, they
pluralize
are
it French like that?
No, no, they are called still acquis because you know that French it's like the and I don't know why the word has stayed has like is in French, but these are like the laws. So every country before coming becoming a EU member, they have to go through these laws and to accept them. And also for the EU to approve that this country has accepted these is able to implement. Now, on the other side, there are some areas where you cannot change the laws. I think regarding the market, the internal market, the competition within EUs, for example, the fish market. I don't know. It's a little bit decided France, like the fish trade between France and Spain and the other countries, so you cannot do whatever you want. And I think that was one of the propaganda that was being done, especially in the UK, for their Brexit. So they were like, okay, we're losing our sovereignty, so we're losing this, we're losing that. I'm not sure that they are really happy now about the Brexit, but anyway, it's their
Yeah,
business. So
I
uh,
think a lot of them are questioning that for right now for sure.
we're not going to discuss about that, but I think that it's the there are some areas where you cannot really step on what has been agreed because you're like going against the agreement for being a EU member state with and the agreements with the other states. On the other side, there are some areas where countries are going against what is called the European values, and there might be ways of sanctioning them, but also it's very difficult politically and diplomatically, like to take measures against specific countries who are going against human rights, which is one of the main pillar of the European Union, and what is called like the European values. So I think it's a little bit what you were saying about United States. So the difference between paper and practice.
Yeah, I actually
So
think that's a great comparison, a way that where they align very similarly. You know, the adoption of European values, I mean, that is nearly identical to some of the issues, if you wanted to declare them, you know, a value, that are going on in the United States, where states are in conflict with the federal government. And I think that's the perfect connective tissue right there that demonstrates how similar they are, both the EU and the federal system of the United States. What I know you were citing some examples, so might as well ask for it. What are your examples within the EU that indicate these misalignment in values?
uh, I mean, there are, I think, two that I could just because they're more related to my work. For example, it's the case of Poland and the criminalization of abortion in Poland, which is something that goes against uh, the the European values in the sense of the human rights, and is when uh, and because sexual and reproductive health rights are part of these human rights. And we can see them in the EU Consensus for the Development, which is one of the most important documents of the EU, and where like the freedom to decide on your body, especially for women, so is considered as a human right.
Can,
So
can
in
you
this case,
elucidate? Can you elucidate, or can you give me an idea of how do the sanctions work within the EU?
oh,
Because if Poland
uh,
is not, you know, consistent with the abortion rights, as are declared by the EU, and there has to be, my understanding, 100% agreement for the EU to have
it's not like
victorious.
in the NATO. No, it's not like a full consensus in the case of
Oh, okay.
no. it might be for some areas, but not for all the other areas.
You see.
So
Okay, so this is where the charters come in. There's like a myriad of charters that list
there
out.
are different, yes, there are different documents that has to be respected, and also, I mean, it's that balance between being an independent country and state, and also being a member of the EU. So there are some areas where the sanctions might be, for example, economic, in the sense of aid, economic financial aid, for example, for different issues, and yeah, blocking, especially blocking of the aid. And I'm waiting now to see what will happen with Hungary. And I know that there has been some very strong declaration against Hungary, who recently banned all the meetings. And I mean, it was not a surprise, but the meetings which regarding LGBTIQ rights. And for example, there will be no pride this year in Budapest, like legal, I mean, a legal pride, because there is this new law in Hungary. So and now the European Commission is working for the new strategy on LGBTIQ rights. So, it goes a little bit like there is a conflict there. So we will see how the EU and European Commission will respond to this new law of Hungary. But there was a reaction that the EU is really like strong on promoting and protecting the human rights of everybody, including LGBTIQ people. So, but I mean, let's see if there is a difference between the declaration and what will happen in reality. So, will there be any sanction against Hungary or not?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to know more what you say. Is the declaration by Hungary to establish new law, or or Hungary's already
No, the new
established it,
law passed.
and the declarations from the EU to somehow
Yeah,
condemn or punishment Hungary,
yes.
and we don't know what that will be, or if even if it's anything.
Maybe it will be nothing. Maybe it will be something. But until
Does it have?
now, it's just a declaration. There is nothing, I mean, I'm not going to say nothing, but there
Mm,
is no no clear idea what the sanctions might be, or if there is any sanction. In this case, the sanctions might be not from the European Commission, but for example, from the European Court of Human Rights, if there will be a process against the government of Hungary at the European Court of Human Rights. So,
For me, this is a great example of a significant difference between how legislation in the United States works. And in fact, some would say the European model is it would be quicker to react, and in some ways it is. But in some ways, like this, where it's important to only a portion of the community, and important only to a portion of the community in the greater organization of the EU, in a way, the United States is actually quicker on topics like that when it's a limited fringe community issue, and that might be unfortunate, but in a way, it's better to have things understood, because if when you live in a society, you have to know the laws if you're going to obey them. So that might sound ridiculous, but the way I mean that is in the U.S. Let's go back to no, okay, in the US, I'll stay there. As I was kind of talking about with the Trump um, entrance in, or re-entrance into the political environment in the United States, there's always this pendulum going back and forth. And that pendulum, it really retards the speed at which a the community establishes its laws, and as those laws are forming up, because we all imagine that in some future date, or hopefully tomorrow, there will be these congealed laws, they'll never change, and they're the perfect law system. And I think, well, maybe that's just me, but that's clearly is always changing with like the type of country of the United States where there's this drastic changing of political ideals. But then in the EU, why I'm saying it's slower is because not only does that occur um, in each country as it does in each state in the United States, but the power of each country seems like those fringe issues are going to be less powerful, even though the country has more power in the organization. And that sounded a little confusing when I said that out loud, but let me try to redo that. If the United States has that same pendulum going back and forth, and at its best, it's only slightly out of tune with the states, that make it up. Where in the European Union, countries are separated by language, by culture, by so many more things that individual states in the US are not separated by. So all the individual pendulums of every country, and until they actually align with the entire EU master pendulum, if you could say that, there's always going to be even more chaos on legislation and culture, and the fringe issues that are trying to make their argument forward so everybody can hear them, accept, deny, modulate them, what have you. And it seems like within the EU, it's going to be a far greater task to do that. What do you think?
Uh, and I think that's the case, and there is also another difference in the sense of the European Commission, like the government, because this European Commission, like the ministers and the prime minister, if we could say, even if that's not really how it is called, they have to represent like all the countries. So it's a little bit different from federal, uh,
Federalism.
yeah, when you have the president and that maybe is representing one party. So you have a clear idea of what this party is, if it's left or right, etc., etc. So that's not the case for the European Union, because you have to represent all the member states, and
Yep.
these member states, some of them might be governed by left wing and some of them by right wing and some by center. So that's another it's not a difficulty, but it's this way of not having um, a leader in the sense of a person or an individual, but to believe in something that it's like transcending just one individual or one party, which I think that it's better because it represents something that goes a little bit beyond one small entity that I would think it's just one person or just one party. The other then the problem is that uh, I think that it should be a little bit more work in order to promote what are these European values, because I think that people in their everyday life, especially in the European Union, they are enjoying the benefits of the European Union. I mean, you can go from, especially when you become a EU member state, you can go from Romania now, for example, to live in Germany, and you benefit from the same social security system and from the same rights. So, with something that was not possible. But on the other side, there is a growing, especially with the far right parties, there is a growing sentiment of okay, EU is impacting or is weakening, if I could say, our sovereignty. Yes, but is also giving you a
Yeah.
lot.
No,
So
you made some great points. I think it's funny for me. I think of the U.S. You can travel anywhere, and that's never been an issue. So that's a distinct way that the EU model and the United States are different. But you also made me think of a couple other. Obviously, there's no policing agency in the European Union as such. It can't do anything without everybody deciding. in a way that's kind of like the federal government, but the federal government has its own policing agency. And in a way, it's like the EU doesn't have a president, doesn't have a single head to quickly make decisions, and it has a rough legislative capability in the fact that it doesn't have the teeth, but it also doesn't have the funding. US federal funding is the majority of funding. Maybe I don't know if I could say that. There's a lot of money within the federal government, but I don't know if that's equal to or greater than all states combined in their budgets. So I'll take that back, but I'll say federal funding is very significant in the United States, and there is no EU component other than we'll try to take a portion of everybody's money and do something with it. I guess there might be comparable. Maybe I need to look a little bit deeper into that actual comparison. And and what else you were talking about? The No, I'm sorry. I
The
missed one more.
social security, I was saying, no, the rights, the labor rights.
Well, you were talking about how long it takes to transition,
Oh, yeah.
and I think you're right. It is totally it's a great deal more time in the EU based on the fact that everybody has to be on board, and they're so culturally different. Yeah. So that is, I was just thinking of the different ways that they're different because in some ways they are similar, and we talked about those.
And there is also this part of, for example, I mean, as you said, you're American and like,
Said that.
so, but like, uh, this sentiment of identity of being American, it's really strong because it's considered even if you're from Florida. So it's like, and in the European Union, this is something kind of new. Like the European Union, as I said, started in 57. So, and it started just with 6 countries, and some of the countries they have been part of the European Union for less than 10 years. So the sentiment of being part of the European Union, it's not the same as being as an American, like being part of the United States of America. So that's why I was saying that sometimes we really forget when I say we, I refer to the EU citizens, and I'm not an EU citizen anyway. No, I mean even though I've been living for 11 years in France, but anyway, like legally, I'm not one. So I think that more should be done. I mean, and it's not. Uh, maybe that's not the purpose of the podcast but it kind of pains me a little bit when I see people that are a little bit against EU because for someone who has so much difficulties to move freely as me, as myself, or as the other countries that are out of the European Union and who do not benefit from all the benefits of the European Union, I think that those who are EU citizens, they really don't appreciate what they have. So that's what really pains me a little
I
bit.
think it's the leaders of some of those countries that think that they want to renegotiate better terms. But you're right, they're missing out on the great benefits they have with the trade and travel, cultural exchange. Yeah, it's huge. I've had this discussion a couple other times with other people, the concept of EU growing or potentially even shrinking, and some countries I doubt are paying into the organization or providing as much resources, personnel, what have you. Their level of commitment is maybe not as strong. So there could be an argument. I don't know if there is, but there could be an argument that you would be better off by getting rid of some of the less advantageous members as opposed to growing and becoming a strong unified Europe through a building level of you know, either treaty or bureaucracy, but nobody wants that. But friendship, the agreement to become good neighbor states. What do you think? Is there a point where we're getting rid of NATO or European countries, or you just go for it, add everybody, and see what happens?
I think that that would be a huge mistake. I mean, from my point of view, to consider some countries as less like deserving, or I don't know how to say it, of
Was
being,
it 2014 that Greece was
yeah.
they were having a difficulty?
Yes, and oh, that was quite a moment. And it was not only Greece, I think that it was Greece, Portugal, Spain, and Italy who were really suffering because of a lot of financial issues and the public budgets and the public debts. And there was this kind of entity that was organized, and it was called the Troika because there were three. I think it was Germany, the Netherlands, and France, or maybe I'm making a mistake, but three like more important EU countries who were controlling the finances of these four other countries that, in a very very discriminative way, were called the pigs, like Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, by some bankers.
There's two
Uh,
eyes I remember in pigs, right? Keep going. I'm sorry. I was just
Maybe Ireland, or maybe
yeah,
I'm making
maybe.
a
I don't know.
mistake.
I don't remember the
Uh, and I remember at the time, if I'm not wrong, he was the head of the European Commission, former Prime Minister of Portugal, Barroso, and he was saying that they had suffered a lot from this discrimination in Portugal, and you know how much I love Portugal. And so they had suffered from this discrimination of being considered always as a small country, as a non-important country, as this and that. And he was saying that finally we are part of an organization where we should really get rid of these kind of things like this is the important country, this is the less important country. What does it mean? And so I think that if the European Union wants to be stronger, they should really get rid of this idea that, oh, for example, Romania is a less deserving country because, I don't know, they are not as rich as France or as Germany, etc., etc. We're now looking that even France and Germany, they are not so great regarding political stability, for example. And we have seen recently with the elections and with a lot of political problems. So, I mean, this is not something that you are important and you're going to be forever this fantastic and rich and this and that country. So there is a cycle there. So maybe the idea is how to cooperate better and how maybe to make these less important countries even more important rather than get rid of them.
That's a
And
great. That's actually a great idea.
so, yeah.
So from my perspective, when I get asked that question, or when I ask that question, who else? Nobody asked that question. When I ask that question, I I personally think that Europe should make itself the strongest cohesive entity that it can, because when it does that, it creates a greater ability to negotiate with the United States, to negotiate with China, to negotiate with, in India. I mean, those are the countries that a great deal of business is going through. So, we'll say Romania. They're not going to negotiate with China and come out with some wonderful deal unless they're getting exploited or they're getting a new what is it, boat and road initiative, construction going on in their country that they're going to lose control of in the future. That sounded very political, but that's the way I believe. So under the idea that you make Europe a super organization, and dude, I am not the believer in world government. I know that, but I guess I do believe in continental government, I guess, if I'm going to establish an idea, because with world government, I see some some scary things that could happen when you give up so much control to such a small um, layer of you know a political construct. I don't know how to say that. The whatever political instrument is above you. If you make that the smallest number of people, it's going to have the most possibility of becoming tyrannical, and that's whatever. That's not my point. Well, kind of my point, but the idea that Europe maintains, you know, strives to engulf as many European countries as it can in order to have that continental stability, continental ability to negotiate, and then, like you said, plus up those individual countries that are having an issue. Maybe if the EU has control of, we'll say the production of a particular military component that's EU compatible, or even an automobile, maybe move to have that work done in those smaller countries that need the economic stability. They need, we'll say, the work, they need the technology, and then that in itself will increase the strength of Europe. So, you know, my question of should we make it smaller or bigger, I obviously already have a champion in that. So that's where I would go with that. And I think the idea of shrinking the EU, you might as well just collapse the entire treaty,
Yeah.
the entire organization, and let the large, powerful countries go their
Yeah.
own way. Um, but that doesn't do anybody any good. So
Especially now, I think that would be really something, I don't know, worthless. So,
yeah, yeah, it would go backwards, take steps back in time to.
yeah.
But anyway, you save
And
yourself a little bit of democratic freedom there, and you give up a little bit of worst case scenario by increasing the size of the EU. But in a way, the long term greater peace will in economic trade, I think, will go the way of the collective as opposed to the individual nations.
and I mean, that goes a little bit in the direction that subjectively I like, because uh, I'd really love to see Albania in the European Union. And I remember in 1991 and 1992, after the fall of communism, one of the most famous expression in Albania was, "We want Albania like all Europe." Like if I translate it like literally. And at the time, I mean, I was like, I don't know, 15, 16 years old, and I was imagining, oh, in 10 years, like how
Mm.
Albania will be, and we will be part of Europe.
Base card.
Now, and now it's like, how many years?
Mm.
30 something. And we're still waiting. So, but at least we're a member of NATO, so
Yeah.
that's a good thing. And we can move into the Schengen space without visa
Mm.
anymore, like for a short-term periods. And I swear that's one of the happiest day of my life. So when that decision in 2010 was taken, so for us to go in Europe, in the Schengen area, without visa, because I remember once I was waiting for a visa, and it was in front of the Greek, I mean, for a visa at the Greek embassy. And we were waiting outside to get the visa, to get the passport. And the guy, he came out of the embassy and he was calling our names, and I was so afraid that maybe he would call my name and I would not hear, because it was like we were like 30 people there waiting, and he was like, "Oh, this one, get your passport." So it was so humiliating. Like you feel, I don't know, less than human, because I don't know what does it mean, less than human, but you feel so worthless of waiting there and being treated like this. And or I wanted to participate in conferences and I could not participate because I had not a visa. And I mean, so it's all these things that when I talk with friends from France or from Germany or from United States, and they kind of do not get it, what it means, but like this free movement, oh boy, it's so important.
Mm.
Uh,
It's funny how quickly you can lose the human component when you start looking at the big picture. And oh, I see the economic benefit, and I see the security benefit, but You're talking about
Yeah.
the human benefit. That's and it overrides everything else, and it's almost totally missed until you bring up things like that. No, I appreciate that.
And I was reading some articles about British students that are suffering so much now, for example, uh, from benefiting from the Erasmus programs, etc., because they could move so freely and go and participate in EU conferences and programs, etc., and now they cannot.
Oh, so this is
So,
like your revenge on those Brits. They're those British people. You got to watch out for them. Mm,
I mean, I don't want to be mean, but sometimes I say, okay, now you understand
uh,
what does
yeah,
it
now you
mean.
get back over there, you colonist. Anyway, actually, hey, so I think I like where we went with this. The comparison is good, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about the 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 what is it called? The ascension, the inclusion of nations in
Accession.
accession. Excuse me. Close enough.
Ascension, that would be fantastic. We're
So
ascending.
maybe I guess we'll talk about that another time because I know I have some experience with NATO when or with Montenegro when they were joining NATO, and it'd be an interesting to compare those two events maybe. So maybe something we'll talk about next time.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
That would mean that we will do two episodes where I can talk about Albania. That would be fantastic.
yeah. Why two?
Yeah.
No, I'm just joking.
No,
Yeah.
today and another one. So wow.
So let's finish with this one little theoretical question that we talked about. Will the U.S. withdraw from NATO? I know we're talking about federalism, we're talking about the EU, and NATO is on a tangent from that, but I think it's part of the conversation. And you seem like you believe it, and I guess that answers the
No.
question of what I believe.
Uh, from NATO, no, I don't believe. From some of the UN organization, I'm afraid. I mean, I really don't want the US to withdraw from some of the UN organization, not only because they are one of the most important like donors or like funders, but also because other countries like China, uh, they would like to step up and fill this this gap, this financial gap. So that's why I wouldn't like US to withdraw. But from NATO, I don't think they will withdraw. I
No,
mean, I
I
don't see the interest that Trump would have to withdraw from NATO. So
well, I would echo it, and I would say that if there are any this is just my personal thoughts. I don't know. I don't read the future for sure, but if I were to make an assessment, I would say Trump is getting very well known for the bluffs that he takes and for lack of a better word, the manipulation that he's used to using in high end business, and that is directly you can equate that to his behavior here. Now he has increasingly more power, and he uses the same tactics and techniques that he's used in the past. And that being said, I think it is just a bluff. I think he would never leave NATO because just as I was indicating that the EU would be stronger as a cohesive unit, it's already that. It's already that already, just because there's one or two countries that have yet to fall in, or, not in a bad way, but who have yet to join. It doesn't mean that the EU is not a massively powerful organization. So I cannot see the United States walking away from that relationship. Um, but I could see again him bluffing that, and I could get in. I could even see people. I can think of one right now. Who we both know, who would who would I don't want to say fall for it because if he knows I'm talking about him, he'll hit me. But anyway, I could see people that would either fall for it in its entirety, or either fall for the idea or understand that to be able to observe all the other people that do fall for it and recognize that there is political pressure underneath the idea that he would do it. But no, I don't think that the United States will separate from NATO anytime soon. Long story longer.
And you were mentioning bluffing, and so I am
Uh,
just thinking that you have to think of an episode about game theory, and maybe
oh,
that would be a very nice topic, like what Trump is doing now. So we could
okay.
analyze it from a game theory point of view.
Well, we probably will do that. How about that?
That would be really an interesting topic and episode, I think.
Yeah, we'll do
Mm.
that for sure. Cool. Is that it?
Yeah, we just touched upon a little bit of
Yeah.
European Union and United States.
Yeah. We need to find something that we don't agree on more because it's always fun to have like little riles. Whatever.
Yeah,
Anyway, thanks a lot.
thank you. See
Talk to you later.
you next time. Yep.